Polypede Works here, coming to you once again with One Piece chapter 1123 entitled The Void Fortnite. And we're not talking about the video game, get out of here. But anyway, we have a continuation finally of the Yamato cover story. Not much is happening. She has just made up with the children, and Denjiro, and the kids are eating Odin, not the guy, the food. So that's very cool, very cute. I like the little baby that's on her head. He's great. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad we're continuing on with the cover story. We are 11 chapters deep into this cover story because this is volume 11. How long is this going to be without anything substantial happening? Good Lord. But I do find it very funny that we're sticking with her this long. And if we're going by Jinbei logic, she should join the crew. Because this is going to be one very, very, very long cover story if we're just hanging about eating and she's not even like, what, halfway through her journey? I still think we're going to meet OT and a lot of the old beast pirates on the way. Don't know where King is, but seeing as how he got attacked by Green Bull along with Queen, they're probably an impel down. So we have to see if we run into Jack or OT or Page One along the way. I'm trying to think, is there anybody else who'd be important? No one comes to mind. Maybe Who's Who? Who's Who would be cool because he had a lot of lore associated with him out of nowhere because he introduces us to the whole idea of Nika. So that in itself is just weird, but we'll see. Don't really know what's to come for Yamato in the future, but I'm excited to see what happens. And the battle is over. Egghead has ended. The Vice Admirals and the Marines were knocked out by the Joy Boy Hockey Blast. Paw. And we see Pomsky and Baby Doll knocked out. I just realized that you can make a pun on her name because she's a baby because of Bonnie, and her name is Doll, so she's Baby Doll. That's good. That's very good. But yeah, we see S-Snake trying to wake Pomsky up. So the hopes of S-Snake being a Blackbeard pirate have been dashed. But I do wonder what's going to become of the Seraphim who have been left behind. Is there going to be a world government ship that comes around to pick them all up? Or is there going to be like a big scavenger hunt that picks away all the important bits from Egghead? I don't know. I still don't know why the Blackbeard pirates even came to Egghead. That's still just so odd to me. And we'll talk about that a little later. But what this chapter tells us is, one, yeah, everything's over. And Luffy is out of gear 5th after he thanks the robot for all of his hard work. Yeah, Emmett is down, so I guess Emmett has passed in the battle against the Gorosei. But yeah, the Giants, along with Luffy and the Straw Hats, because we see the Thousand Sunny right behind the Elbaf ship, and we get to see the scale of these things being compared, and the giant ship is at least 4 times bigger than the Straw Hat ship, which is crazy. Think about the scale, because the Straw Hat ship is pretty big. So yeah, they're on their way to Elbaf. We're finally going to Elbaf, boys. Thank heavens. So we got Bonnie supposedly sleeping on Kuma, I guess. We've got Zoro, we've got Usopp elated to be going to Elbaf, and Luffy is now shriveled up and old, being cared for by Nami, which is very cute. I like that scene. And they also have Vegapunk's corpse. And it is Sanji who then thinks about how weird it was that Vegapunk supposedly said something before his imminent demise. It's very funny throughout this chapter that Vegapunk is confiding in Sanji. Because if you recall, Vegapunk was colleagues with Vince Smoke Judge back in the day. So essentially he's confiding this wish that we'll get to later in the son of his former colleague. I think that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of cool indeed, especially seeing how Sanji was the one carrying him around during the later half of Egghead. So that's cool. But this leads us into a flashback. The flashback basically just goes over how Vegapunk thought that the leaked information was caused by Lilith because she's the embodiment of his evil intent, which is interesting to think about. And I've been talking about this on the podcast, Rose Skull podcast, a lot. And I've been talking about this over the time that I've been covering Egghead. Vegapunk is a dumb character. He really is, because it's very funny that he suspects Lilith. Then Pythagoras finds out that it was York doing all these misdeeds. And Vegapunk laments how foolish it was to personify his own greed into a whole individual. Yeah, it was dumb. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? And it's funny that we don't get a reason as to why York does what she does, but from the beginning, and I've heard no one else say this. If someone has said it, hey, we're on the same page. But I've always said from the beginning, I think the reason why York did this because Vegapunk treated her poorly and gave her a designated job, but she, being a Vegapunk, like him and the rest of the Vegapunks, saw like, wait a minute, I'm a genius too. Why am I being relegated to being a stomach and a rectum for all these goofies? No, I'm going to be the tippity top. I'm going to be the main Vegapunk. And that's what happened. So it's really weird that you knew you personified your own greed into an individual and then get shocked that you find out that greed was beating greedy. And this is even more interesting if he was indeed mistreating his own greed. So what did you think was going to happen if you mistreated your own greed and then she turned out to be evil and that evil intent turned into more greed and ambition? That's odd, isn't it? But unfortunately, we do not see where York is in the present. However, Shaka, Vegapunk, Stella, and Pythagoras find all this information out. They make countermeasures. They record the message to the world, which they bring up. That's something that Ohara did not have 22 years ago, which is true. So they're preparing all this stuff, and then they eventually erase their memories so they can't be suspicious to others as the events play out how they think they're going to play out. And apparently, Vegapunk York delivered a piece of the Mother Flame to the world government in order to power an ancient weapon. Vegapunk Stella doesn't say which ancient weapon that the world government has in their possession. I'm going to assume is Uranus, which we find out from Neptune back in the day, seeing as how I believe in Greek mythology, Roman mythology. I believe in Roman mythology, Uranus is called the Sky Father. So maybe the ancient weapon is Uranus, seeing as how it was a big attack from the sky. I still think that big thing that sucked up Capone Beiji during the start of the time skip was Uranus, because we don't have a lot of sky crafts in One Piece. It's like maybe Uranus, the Maxim, and then the rest of them are sky islands. So there aren't a lot of flying machines. But that's just food for thought. But yeah, apparently the Mother Flame can be delivered via mechanized sea beasts to the world government. How she did that, I do not know. Because it seems weird. How does she put that amount of power in a container so it could be transported? That's so interesting to me. But they find all this out. They make countermeasures against York. And then after those countermeasures have been completed, they come to the conclusion that they'll probably have to die. And their deaths are even questioned by, I believe, Shaka or Pythagoras, because they're not sure what death means for them, seeing as how all of them are technically projections of Punk Records, which is being held in a totally different facility. So yeah, that's weird too. I don't know how that works, especially for characters like Lilith and York, seeing as how they seem to be fully biological. I don't know. That's always been a weird thing for me. But moving on, they talk about too how it's important to safeguard the weird champagne bottle that's in the middle of Egghead, because that was the thing creating all these island clouds, which is cool because they're saying that the cloud loft technology, which is what it's called, is a very important component if the world does flood, because then it will give the people of the world refuge, which is a nice gesture. It really is. And it's weird too that during this, we see York up and about while she greets Vegapunk while he's on top of Emmett. Because it's weird that you don't really see her moving around a whole lot until the events of Egghead actually start to transpire. So this is weird. Is she checking up on him to make sure he's none the wiser of her actions? That's weird. I don't know. That's suspicious. That's just interesting in itself. So yeah, the three of them, Pythagoras, Shaka, and Stella, erase their own memories as to not act suspicious around the others. And they leave a note for themselves saying that they will have to perish in order for things to transpire, which Vegapunk finds it very odd that he's telling himself to kill himself. And I do find it very interesting that Vegapunk's life basically ends the way that Kuma's life kind of ends, with a memory wipe. Though with Vegapunk, he's just wiping memories of 14 days or so, whereas Kuma's whole personality was rewritten. So, I mean, yeah, it's interesting in that way. It's poetic. But what's weird about this too is there like an artificial brain inside the body of Vegapunk? Because how are his memories wiped if there's nothing to wipe? Because it's understood that the full capacity of his brain is Punk Records. So I guess there's just like a thing that the antenna, the Apple thing on his head, that's just connected to something that acts as his brain but isn't really his brain. I would love to know how that works, because we never got a straight answer how that works. That's so odd. Or is this just brain fruit shenanigans? Is it dough fruit shenanigans? It might be dough fruit shenanigans. I'm not sure. But that's just odd. It's always been odd. Also, funny thing to point out, Shaka's eyes apparently exist as they are able to bug eye his head. And we find this out as Stella, Shaka, and Pythagoras are reading the note from Vegapunk to themselves, saying that they have taken precautions and to put faith in themselves that they have to die. So they're reacting to that news. And as soon as they're reacting to that, the Marines are pulling up to the house. They're pulling up to Egghead, as well as Bonnie and Luffy being on the island. I like how they call Luffy Emperor Luffy here, Emperor Straw Hat. That's very cool. And they also find out that Kizaru and Saturn have pulled up as well. And this is during the events of the actual arc. After that, we get the bit of when Vegapunk confides in Sanji, saying that even though he doesn't have memory of what he has done, he feels as though if he were to die here, something important will happen. So trust in him and let him die when they do reach the ground and after Bonnie is safe. So that catches up to speed to the present, when Vegapunk confides in Sanji, and his last words to Sanji presumably are, "About the One Piece, I want you guys to be the ones to find it." So Vegapunk has his money on the Straw Hats to be the ones who find the One Piece. And I think that in itself is pretty cool. And we close out on the Giant celebrating with an exasperated Luffy and a very excited Usopp, as they're all going to Elbaf, the island of Usopp's dreams. So, with that being said, that is the chapter. No break next week. Now, what do I think of all of this? Well, I guess it makes sense as to why Vegapunk seemed a little naive during the events of the arc. That does clean things up a little bit. However, it is a bit weird that we don't know why York did what she did. It's also a bit weird that we don't see York just yet, or see if her plan actually worked, because Saturn's not in this chapter. So maybe Saturn did take York back to Mary Joas, much to my dismay, because I did want her to be a Blackbeard pirate. I think that's where her talents would have shined, as opposed to just being a celestial dragon. But I don't know. We'll see what happens, because still it's weird to me as to why the Blackbeard pirates even went to Egghead. Like, it doesn't make any sense. That's why I still put money down that Caribou ate York or something, because there would have to be a takeaway from this arc that's important, because I just can't see why the world government would get York. Like, why would York win? You can't get what I mean? Also, what's weird, and I'm sure we'll talk about this on the podcast in the future, but in terms of Egghead as an arc, I have to say, despite a lot of the cool things that have happened, and despite the Kuma flashback, which was very good, I have to say that the arc itself is a tad underwhelming. The reason why I think this is because we were promised a lot of answers concerning devil fruits in this arc, and we did get an answer as to where they come from, which kills all those devil fruit tree rumors. Like, stop it. Really, stop it. Those don't exist anymore. There is no devil fruit tree, okay? We're over that. But I think we didn't really get into depth about how a lot of these devil fruit situations can occur, despite having some very interesting devil fruit anomalies in the crew, like Brooke and Chopper. But I guess it is what it is. I'm just kind of salty that we got even more questions as opposed to answers, because many might not think the Seraphim are a big deal. I don't think you know how big of a deal they are. These guys could be story rewriting because they are such big deals within themselves. However, again, I do think Bonnie in herself is a great character. I love how a lot of the context and a lot of the questions that were answered were present in the Kuma flashback, because it is very enlightening, I guess you could say, to get the various scenarios that Kuma was in from his perspective. It's also very cool. By extension, Bonnie now knows everything the Straw Hats have been through and how her father feels about the Straw Hats, and more importantly, Luffy, via all the things that he has seen. So all of his experiences are now her experiences, which is why I can't see Kuma living. It just seems weird for him to live. It also seems weird if Bonnie doesn't join. I'm just saying that again. If Bonnie doesn't join, that would be disastrous. Also, some things that we need to point out. Where is Stussy? Because I think Stussy, and I made videos on this, I've made quite a few, I think she could be a Robin type character in the future, because she does hold some prominence in an area that we have not yet explored. But talking about Egghead as a whole, it just seems like it's made to set up things that will become important in the future. I guess you can compare it to Long Ring Longland, because Long Ring Longland 2 established characters like Kuzan, because before then, we hadn't really had a good notion as to how powerful admirals are. So the same thing could be said about Egghead. It establishes how powerful the five elders are. That's what I'm thinking about Egghead. It's an establishing arc. Do I think it's one of the weaker establishing arcs? Kinda. Because again, the biggest lore drops were from Kuma, but then in those lore drops there were more questions like, what is a buccaneer? A lot of people have been theorizing that it could be a type of half giant, kind of like the Onis, considering Kaido and Yamato, and seeing as how Yamato's cover story is happening at the same time as that information was revealed, that seems more likely than not. But we don't really know anything just yet. That's why I hope in Elbaf, I need a full genealogy chart like you gave us in Fishman Island with the merfolk and the fishmen. I need a full genealogy chart of all the giants and all the giant subtypes. I need giants. I need ancient giants. I need Onis. I need buccaneers, presumably. I need to know what happens. Also, wontons, too. I wonder if Big Pan's going to show back up, because he's a wonton. He's a fishman and a giant mixed together. So I need him as well. I hope he does show up, seeing as how Foxy did show up in Egghead with Porchemy and Hamburg. So yeah, it'll be nice to see him again in Elbaf. I just hope that all the giant lore from Bragi and Dory all the way down to Oars comes in place in Elbaf. Elbaf should be a fun arc. It should be a great arc, but it should be a lore arc in terms of it delving out answers. We need answers on Saul. We need Saul's perspective further on the world government and Marines. I would like to see Dahl in Elbath, you know? So, all in all, Elbath, I don't think will be as disappointing as Egghead, because Egghead as a whole, despite it setting us up for a lot of things to be revealed with the presence of Vegapunk, who's the big dough fruit man on campus, it just didn't deliver on those answers, which is sad because now we have to rely on potentially Lilith and York to give us information about dough fruits moving on. About that, it's weird that too we don't know what we're gonna do with Lilith. That's kind of weird too. I don't know where she's gonna go. She could go to Neomads. She could go to Neomads. She could go to Crossgill, which would be weird but funny. So we'll just have to see how things go. In the next coming chapters, I don't think we're going to be introduced to Elbath straight away. I still think there's still a lot to do in Egghead. As far as just finishing things up, telling us where characters are, how the world is reacting, perhaps telling us what's happening on Empty Bluffs Island, which I think will be important. So yeah, there are some things that we still need to know. But all in all, Elbath, I think, will be better than Egghead, because Egghead is what it is. Maybe in hindsight, Egghead will be better than how it reads right now. We get a lot of big moments, and those are cool, but those big moments just lead into more questions as opposed to answers, which is kind of a melancholy feeling. But maybe Elbath and other arcs will start to clean things up, seeing as how Oda keeps saying we're at the end of the story, which is a lie if you ask me. There's too much to go over for this to be the end. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm glad there's no break next week. And yeah, I guess that's all I have here today. Give me your thoughts.